This is the second in our series of hearings aimed at fostering job creation across the United States and to make Made in America matter again. Today, with Japan reeling from a catastrophic earthquake and tsunami, and violent turmoil in the Middle East spreading, our nation's trade outlook is more clouded than ever. As chairman of the subcommittee, which has jurisdiction over trade issues, I'm convinced that we can create tens of thousands of desperately needed jobs in our nation by expanding U.S. exports through our free trade agreements. The chair now recognizes herself for an opening statement. In 2007, Apple introduced its very first iPhone, and Congress finally approved the United States-Peru trade promotion agreement after years of give and take. Since then, there have been 3 new generations of iPhones, 2 iPads, and several new nano iPods, but not a single free trade agreement signed into law, not one. So while American ingenuity zips along at millions of bits per second, America's trade policies are stuck in the fax age, and it's time for an upgrade. Our subcommittee has a unique opportunity to roll out a new model for the future and to demonstrate leadership on this critically important issue. But time is running out. America's $46 billion trade deficit in January grew at the fastest rate in 18 years. While Washington rolls its eyes and wrings its hands, our competitors in Europe are busy signing on the dotted line and moving quickly into promising new markets. We simply cannot wait on the sidelines any longer, allowing ourselves to be benched by partisan politics. Today, we'll hear what the administration plans to do about the trade imbalance from Francisco J. Sanchez, Undersecretary of Commerce for International Trade. And let me be clear, long-stalled trade promotion agreements with South Korea, Colombia, and Panama should move forward immediately, all of them. Years of lost opportunities have only resulted in thousands of lost jobs all across the country. Let's make Made in America matter again by actually increasing jobs through expanded exports and trade. If you doubt that we can do it, then just consider the iPhone again. Today, Apple is the second most valuable company in the world, and yet at one point, it was only 90 days from bankruptcy court. Apple didn't turn around its fortunes by being timid and parochial. Instead, the company was bold and innovative. Apple sold shares to rival Microsoft and agreed to make Internet Explorer its default browser. That's the kind of decisive, forward-looking thinking we need today when it comes to our trade policies. President Obama has vowed to double exports in 5 years, but that's simply not going to happen if we continue to allow free trade agreements to be held hostage by organized labor or to languish in limbo. It's disingenuous for the administration to say, let's work together to create new jobs, but not if it means passing all 3 trade agreements together. That's the kind of thinking that led to a $46 billion U.S. trade deficit in January. And that's the kind of thinking that threatens the future prosperity of our nation. To date, the administration has not offered any detailed plans for opening up trade with Colombia and Panama. We've gotten plenty of promises, but no plans. It's time to quit playing politics with our trade policies. Tens of thousands of new jobs hang in the balance, as well as tens of billions of dollars in new exports. Today, American businesses are genuinely concerned, and I believe rightfully so, that if the proposed U.S.-Korea agreement is finally approved this year by itself, then separate trade deals with Colombia and Panama will be quietly forgotten as a concession to organized labor. If that's not the case, Secretary Sanchez, then this is the administration's golden opportunity to set the record straight. Please tell us how the White House plans to deal with all 3 free trade agreements. Today you have a chance to make some news and to give American businesses a reason to cheer. I have my fingers crossed, Mr. Secretary, but at the very least, let's make sure our signals are not crossed. Exactly what is the administration's plan, and what is the timetable for accomplishing it? Recently, Secretary of State Clinton said, and I'm quoting now, "Our goal is to have all 3 pending agreements, Korea, Panama, and Colombia, with their outstanding issues addressed and approved by Congress this year." And yet, with the next breath, an administration official warns that trying to pass all 3 free trade agreements together, and quoting again, is putting all 3 agreements at risk. Perhaps I lost the facts, Mr. Secretary, but how do you reconcile these positions? It is my sincere hope that we can put politics aside, work out our legitimate differences, and approve all 3 trade agreements this year. We simply cannot sit on the sidelines any longer while other nations gain footholds in promising new global markets. Too much is at stake for us to fail. And I yield back my time, and I'd like to recognize the gentleman from North Carolina, the ranking member of our subcommittee, Mr. Butterfield, for 5 minutes.
Let me thank you, Chairman Bono Mag, for convening this very important hearing. This is a timely conversation, and I'm glad that we are finally having it. A major part of our economic recovery is indeed increased exports. The President seems to get it. He clearly knows that increasing exports is key to American economy returning to the pre-recession levels. To that end, during the State of the Union, the President announced the goal of doubling U.S. exports by 2014, a goal that requires exports to grow to $3.14 trillion at the end of that period. And in March 2010, the President issued executive order officially creating the Export Promotion Cabinet, which oversees the coordination and implementation of the National Export Initiative. We refer to it as the NEI. The NEI brings together secretaries from 7 federal departments as well as the heads of other federal entities. As Commerce Secretary Locke said recently, the NEI represents the first time the United States will have a government-wide export promotion strategy with focused attention from the President and his cabinet. Other nations have employed similar strategic initiatives to their benefit, and it is absolutely essential that the U.S. embrace the NEI by working towards its goal of improving advocacy and trade promotion, increasing access to export financing, removing trade barriers, enforcing trade rules, and adopting policies that promote sustainable and balanced growth. We have great potential to export more. With the world's population at nearly 7 billion people, 95% of those live outside of our country. The products they purchase and the equipment they use must come from somewhere else. There's no reason it shouldn't be from the U.S. Recent data indicates that foreign markets are buying more and more U.S. goods. With only a year under NEI's belt, exports have grown 17%. Let me repeat that, 17%. But more must be done. We must not focus solely on convincing foreign entities to purchase goods that we already make. Instead, we must also encourage American businesses to innovate and develop cutting-edge products that will be attractive to fast-growing foreign markets. We must make more in America. This is beginning to happen in areas like medical technology and green technology and agriculture. But innovation is just one part of the effort to increase exports. Exposure to foreign markets is another equally important piece to this puzzle. The ITA has been moving at a blazing pace to participate in trade and reverse trade missions to put American manufacturers in front of foreign buyers. Their efforts have paid off, with ITA executing 35 trade missions in 31 countries involving some 400 U.S. companies within the last year, resulting in an anticipated $2 billion in increased exports. It is my hope that small and medium-sized enterprises across the U.S., those same businesses that are the focus of NEI, will avail themselves of the tremendous opportunities to begin or increase exports to foreign markets. This could yield immeasurable benefits to the U.S. economy and could mean tens of thousands of new, good-paying jobs, dramatically transforming struggling communities like Rocky Mount, North Carolina, located in my congressional district, where the unemployment rate is 12%. Just a small increase in exports could yield tremendous benefits for the American people and for industry across the country. I want to thank the witnesses for being here today, the Undersecretary and the other witnesses. I read your testimonies last evening. I look forward to working with American businesses and my colleagues in a collaborative effort to increase American exports. Thank you, and before I yield back, I want to read this note, Madam Chairman. Just go ahead and yield back. All right, I yield back. All right. I saw the Chairman Emeritus down at the end of the panel and wanted to see if he needed time, but they're going to work that out later. Thank you. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman, and Chairman Upton yielded his 5 minutes for an opening statement to me in accordance with committee rules. As his designee, I now recognize Ms. Blackburn, the Vice Chairman of the subcommittee, for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Welcome to our witness. Earlier this year in his State of the Union, our President laid out an encouraging goal of doubling exports in the next 3 years. We all took note of that. And now all we need is leadership so that we can achieve that objective. It is important to my state of Tennessee. Leadership is needed by both the President and by both parties in Congress to finally step up and do what is best for the economy. That being said, without strong intellectual property enforcement tools in place, no free trade or exporting policy will work. In my home state of Tennessee, there are countless companies, both big and small, that rely heavily on strong U.S. export policies for their livelihoods. Among them, Tom James Incorporated, Bridgestone, Swiftwick Socks, Cargill Cotton, Nucor Steel, International Paper, Eastman Chemicals, FedEx, Wright Thought Pens, and now Volkswagen is on the way. Those are just a few of the companies that are saying, get this intellectual property policy right. If IP cannot be protected, innovation and commerce is going to slow. If we are to continue as the world's leading innovator, if we are to reclaim the lead in green innovation, if we are going to truly spur small business growth, we must protect intellectual property with the same vigor as physical property. We need your leadership to do so. We need the leadership of this committee. And Madam Chairman, I yield back.
Thank the gentlelady, and would like to recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Barton, Chairman Emeritus of this committee, for 2 minutes.
Thank you. If we're holding a hearing in this subcommittee, there must be a cabinet secretary testifying in another subcommittee. Last week, I believe we had the Secretary of Health and Human Services, and you had a hearing. So this week, we have the Secretary of Energy, the Chairman of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and we have a hearing here. So it's no disrespect to you, Mr. Secretary, that given what's happened in Japan, a lot of our members are going to be downstairs with the NRC Chairman and the Energy Secretary. But we're glad you're here. We're all concerned about jobs, and we're all concerned about job creations. I think both sides of the aisle agree with that. Unfortunately, my friends on the minority side seem to be able to only create jobs in the government sector, and those on my side would rather we create as many jobs as possible in the private sector. Hopefully we can reach agreement that that's the way to go in this hearing. There are several things that we need to do. Number one, we need to enforce our existing free trade agreements. That's easier said than done, obviously. And number two, we need to pass some new trade agreements. And I think you're very well aware that the Senate has yet to take up several of those agreements, but hopefully in the next month or so that they will. I'd like to see us pass a free trade agreement with Korea, with Colombia, and also with Panama. And with that, Madam Chairwoman, I yield back. But welcome, Mr. Secretary.
Would like to recognize the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Kinzinger, for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, for the time and for holding this hearing, and thank you, sir, for coming in. And I want to say, thank you to the administration for the support on the Korean Free Trade Agreement. I think that's going to be very important. In my district, the free trade agreement itself will support $75 million in exports and nearly 300 jobs. More American goods in foreign markets mean more American jobs back home, and removing export tariffs on agriculture, electronics, and manufactured goods makes American products more competitive in the Korean marketplace and fuels both nations' economies. History's taught us that robust trade creates jobs and strengthens the economy. Our nation cannot afford at this critical time to pass on opportunities to expand free trade. I'm very concerned with this administration's failure to lead on two remaining free trade agreements with our allies and partners to the south, Colombia and Panama. These trade agreements serve as important milestones for the bilateral relationships with these countries, and failure to take action puts American exports and jobs at risk. The U.S. International Trade Commission believes the Colombian agreement alone could increase U.S. exports by $1 billion. In Panama, companies like Caterpillar build and deliver the equipment that's developing the nation's infrastructure, but do so under onerous rules and fees. Free trade agreements lower cost and benefits us all. Although I'm pleased with the administration's actions on Korea, I do not believe we can allow a vote on the Korean free trade agreement without taking action on Colombia and Panama. We should not give the administration a pass on future agreements through the passage of one agreement. Thank you, Madam Chairman, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the ranking member, Mr. Butterfield.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have no further speakers except to say that the ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Waxman, was here earlier. He wanted to be here for this hearing, and he especially wanted to welcome his constituent, Mr. Krause, from Capstone Turbine. But Mr. Waxman had to leave for another hearing, and I ask unanimous consent that his statement, his opening statement that he would have given had he been here, be included in the record.
Without objection.
Thank you. I yield back.
And we did see Mr. Waxman pop in briefly, so I'm sorry he had to leave, but as Chairman Barton said, there are other things happening as well. So But we do have two panels before us today. Each of the witnesses has prepared an opening statement that will be placed into the record. Each of you will have 5 minutes to summarize that statement in your remarks. On our first panel, we're fortunate to have the Honorable Francisco J. Sanchez, Undersecretary of Commerce for International Trade. We appreciate your being here very much today, Mr. Secretary, and recognize you for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Chairwoman Bono Mack, Ranking Member Butterfield, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today. In his State of the Union address, President Obama told Americans that the future is ours to win. By understanding how the world has changed, we can create the environment that can expand the American economy. Great opportunities lie in the vast global market. Today, 95% of the world's customers live outside our borders. The International Monetary Fund forecasts that 83% of the world's economic growth during the next 5 years will happen outside the United States. The nations of the world are giving rise to a new global middle class. They are a new marketplace for American exports, and one example of this is travel and tourism. Data released just this morning reveals a record-breaking 60 million international visitors in the United States, shattering the previous record set in 2000. These travelers spent more than $134 billion. That's a 12% increase over 2009, generating a 50% increase for the travel trade surplus of $32 billion. Travel and tourism is no small industry. These exports generate $1.3 trillion for the U.S. economy, supporting 7.8 million jobs. Through the National Export Initiative and its goal of doubling exports by 2015, we hope to support millions of jobs right here at home. U.S. exports of goods and services in 2010, representing $1.83 trillion, increased nearly 17% over 2009. That is the largest year-to-year percent increase in more than 20 years. As we search for ways to create jobs for American workers, increasing our nation's exports must be an important tool in our toolbox. On average, manufacturing jobs supported by exporting pays up to 18% more than non-export supported jobs. The NEI is the United States' first presidential-led government-wide export promotion strategy, and it's good for American workers and companies alike. The NEI focuses on 5 areas: improving trade advocacy and export promotion, increasing access to credit, especially for small and medium-sized businesses, removing trade barriers abroad, robustly enforcing our trade laws, and pursuing policies to promote strong, sustainable, and balanced growth. Congress created the International Trade Administration to promote American companies and workers abroad. During 2010, ITA assisted more than 5,500 U.S. companies. 85% of these were small and medium-sized companies. ITA coordinated an unprecedented 35 trade missions to 31 countries with nearly 400 companies participating. We recruited 13,000 foreign buyers to major U.S. trade shows and connected them with U.S. companies, resulting in approximately $770 million in sales. In 2010, ITA also assisted U.S. companies competing for foreign government procurement contracts, winning projects valued at $18.7 billion in U.S. export content, and that supported an estimated 101,000 jobs. We successfully resolved 82 trade barriers in 45 countries, helping to ensure U.S. companies better access to overseas markets. The Obama administration is committed to aggressively enforcing our trade laws. In 2010, we had approximately 300 anti-dumping and countervailing duty orders in place, covering more than 120 products from 40 countries. We strive to make ITA the one point of contact in the federal government for companies who want to succeed abroad. The administration is continuing our hard work to address outstanding concerns with the pending trade agreements and to improve those agreements and get them to Congress as they become ready. As this subcommittee is aware, and many of you have already mentioned, the U.S.-Korea trade agreement is ready for consideration. President Obama is eager to see this agreement ratified, as I know many of you are, and he requests that Congress approve this agreement. With the same engagement and bipartisan cooperation as we've had on the Korea agreement, we will continue to address outstanding concerns relating to the Panama and Colombia agreements. Our goal is to have all three of these agreements with their outstanding issues addressed, approved by Congress. We will not be left behind as others secure greater market share at the expense of American exporters. To compete, we must access the world's fastest growing markets, and we must do so on a playing field that is both level and reflects our values as Americans. The NEI is the Obama administration's commitment to help U.S. companies compete and win in an increasingly competitive global marketplace. I thank you again for the opportunity to come before you, and I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. The chair recognizes herself for 5 minutes for questions. As you mentioned, the President's NEI is designed to double U.S. exports by 2014. First of all, clarification, is that 2014 or 2015?
2015.
The President did say in the State of the Union 2014.
Well, then the President's right.
Good. Good answer. But isn't that going to be very difficult to accomplish unless we enter into new trade agreements with countries like Korea, Colombia, and Panama?
There's no question that one of the most important things we can do to achieve the doubling of exports is reducing barriers. And trade agreements play an important role in that. In fact, we have 17 trade agreements in place now. With those 17 countries, we actually have a trade surplus.
But if we focus on the three in question, I think that a number of members raised those three specifically. Is the administration committed to getting all three trade agreements completed this year?
They absolutely are completed. They're absolutely committed to getting all the issues resolved and getting them to Congress as soon as possible.
What is the timetable?
Well, let me just say what we've done to achieve that. Obviously, Korea is ready to come before you. With Colombia, we sent a team to Colombia a few weeks ago. There is a team now from Colombia meeting with folks at USTR. We are working very, very hard to work through the issues that we believe still need to be resolved with regard to their labor code and violence toward labor organizers. So I'm very confident, just from the activity that you've seen over the last 8 weeks, that we will move forward on Colombia.
Thank you. Switching gears for a second, Mr. Secretary, U.S. creativity, without a doubt, is one of our nation's greatest competitive advantages, but we've ignored it for too long. Around the world, especially in places like Russia, online theft is undermining that competitiveness. Can you tell me what the administration is doing to ensure that the government of Russia effectively responds to this threat before it joins the WTO?
Well, you're absolutely right that intellectual property rights protections is one of the most important trade barriers that affect American competitiveness, and we work on that issue across the world. And in Russia, we work closely with the business community, and Russia recently passed a law that upgrades their enforcement of piracy and counterfeit products. So
is piracy up or down?
I'm sorry?
Is the rate of it up or down?
I don't know the exact rate of piracy with regard to Russia. What I can tell you is, though, with our encouragement and working closely with the business community, Russia has acted to expand and upgrade its enforcement. Now, the proof is in the pudding, and this happened in late November, so it's too early to tell. But I can tell you that we are closely monitoring what's going on in Russia. We're working very closely with the business community. And if we don't see a problem, we will be sure to continuously raise this issue because it's very important to our competitiveness.
And also, a number of members on this committee, specifically Ms. Blackburn and myself, are very interested and very keenly aware, and will be watching if we really hold Russia as well as China's feet to the fire as far as piracy goes. But finally, I have 3 yes or no questions for you. Simple yes or no. Good news. Is the free trade agreement with Colombia in trouble because of opposition from labor?
No.
What about Panama?
No.
Will the agreements again get done this year?
I am confident we will resolve these issues and get them to Congress.
Yes or no?
The issues will be resolved this year.
All right, thank you, and I yield back my time and would recognize the ranking member for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Undersecretary, the National Export Initiative lays out what we call a bold goal to double exports in 5 short years. It outlines priorities and strategies for streamlining U.S. government export promotion activities. That's a promising set of ideas. As chairman of the Trade Promotion Coordinating Committee, the Department of Commerce has to coordinate approximately 20 separate agencies. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
In export promotion, ranging from DOE to the U.S. Trade Representative to the Department of Agriculture. And instead of tackling the problem, the NEI creates another layer called the Export Promotion Cabinet. Mr. Secretary, in approximately 90 days, the President intends to recommend how we address some of these redundancies. He's promised to do that. He should be commended. Previous administrations only have asked for generic reorganization authority but refused to explain how such authority might be used. So far, it sounds as if the President will recommend specifics, and trade programs are a good place to start. Would you speak to that briefly, if you would, please?
Yes, Congressman. Let me first say that the Cabinet, President's Export Promotion Cabinet, does not really add another layer of bureaucracy. It's, in fact, requiring cabinets to pay attention to the importance of export promotion. So for many years, Secretary of Commerce and Secretary of State were the primary cabinet members who, when they went abroad, would do commercial diplomacy. Under this export promotion cabinet, any cabinet member that goes abroad is also tasked with commercial diplomacy. In addition to this, Secretary of State Clinton has directed her ambassadors and said that your performance will be measured in part by the degree to which you do commercial diplomacy. So it's more than anything putting emphasis on the importance of this. Now, with specific to the reorganization, as President Obama said, we can always do better. And it is his goal to review how we do export promotion. As you pointed out, there are many agencies that have some role to play in export promotion. And it's his goal to take a fresh look at that and see how we can best do that. Now, they're just now in the process of gathering information, interviewing both folks within the government as well as in the private sector that they serve. And my understanding is that they'll have a recommendation to the President in about 90 days, but it's still in the process of being formulated.
Thank you. Some people have suggested that in order to increase exports, the U.S. should focus on exporting more of the same goods and the same services that it already exports, or more the goods and services that U.S. manufacturers are good at producing right now. That probably sounds reasonable, but I'm concerned that if that is all we do, we may be forgetting the most basic tenet of economics, that is supply and demand. So, Mr. Undersecretary, can you tell me what ITA is doing to ensure that U.S. manufacturers know what goods and services other countries really want? For example, does ITA regularly survey the domestic and import markets of other countries? And if so, how do we go about this?
Thank you for the question. We are doing rigorous analysis both on the markets that offer the best opportunity for us, and that's a combination of emerging markets, China, Brazil, India, next-tier markets like Vietnam, Indonesia, Turkey, Colombia, Peru, but also focusing on mature markets, Canada and Mexico, for example. 42% of our exports go to countries within the Western Hemisphere. So we're doing rigorous market analysis, and then we're superimposing on that sector analysis within each of those markets to see where we get our best bang for the buck. And I would say, as the chairwoman pointed out in her opening statement, it isn't just what we do best, but it's the innovation that we create. Apple is a great example of innovation in practice and the very positive impact it can have on our economy. So we are focusing on those sectors that can have the highest impact in those markets where we see high growth and high opportunity.
All right, I have another question, but maybe the next round. Thank you. I yield back.
All right, under the committee rules, the chair will now recognize Mr. Pompeo of Kansas for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and good morning, Secretary Sanchez. You talked, when you were talking about the Columbia Agreement, as labor being the last sticking point. Is that correct?
Well, the issue was certain provisions in their labor code, as well as concerns about violence toward labor organizers, and in particular impunity toward those who commit the acts of violence.
And would that be the same for the Panama Agreement as you're working for?
The Panama Agreement, there, I think one of the issues remaining has to do with their labor code. It is, it's an issue that we are working closely with the Panamanian government, and we don't see any big problem. We don't foresee any challenges in moving that forward.
We had a chance to talk just briefly before the hearing started this morning, and you talked about being an evangelist for trade.
Yes.
Kansas 4th Congressional District relies on enormous trade exports. We build airplanes and airplane components in south central Kansas, and we export a lot of agricultural items as well. When you're out evangelizing, do you talk to organized labor about how important trade agreements are to them? I know in our district that the more trade we have, the better. Our aircraft manufacturing plants have the IAM as their primary union, and we have lots of union folks that are great folks in the 4th District. These trade agreements are critical to them. I hope that you are out there talking to them about that. Can you tell me what you tell them about the importance of trade?
Yes, I have reached out to labor, and we do meet. And I talk about the impact of the existing agreements. As I mentioned earlier, we have 17 current agreements, and in the aggregate, with those 17 agreements, we have a goods surplus, a significant surplus. And so overall, they have been good. Now, I acknowledge that in certain sectors and in certain communities, that it isn't equally distributed, and some of them may be hurt. And so it's important that we support those communities when those things happen. But overall, for our economy, trade agreements have a positive impact. And the other thing I tell them is that, as the chairwoman pointed out in her testimony, is that other countries are not waiting for us to sign agreements. Agreements are being signed by the EU, by South Korea, by other countries in Southeast Asia, by countries in South America. And so if we don't move, we get left behind. And that's not good for the American economy, not good for American companies, and certainly not good for American workers.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm glad to hear that from this administration. I think that's an important message. I know I hear from our agricultural folks already about the delay in Colombia impacting their ability to move crops into a market that they think they can be incredibly competitive in. I guess my last comment is you'd mentioned a Series 80, I think it was, in your statement, trade barriers that you'd knocked down. Can you give me a couple of concrete examples in the last 12 months, places and particular barriers that you all took on and were successful in helping us increase exports?
I don't have a specific one in mind, but I can give you kind of an illustration in that these are initiated by a company who is trying to get into a particular market, and there might be a regulation that is overly burdensome, goes beyond just responding to the public benefits that they're trying to create with the regulation, and creates a barrier. So we will work with that country, with that trading partner, to put a spotlight on that and reduce it. We've done this in 45 different countries, including countries like China, Brazil, Turkey, and India. I'll be happy to get more specific ones to you in writing after the hearing.
I'd appreciate that. We've got some issues with export controls as well. I know that's not directly tied to what you do, but I think you may be heading out my way before long, and I'd love to get a chance to spend a few minutes talking to you about it.
I'll be well prepared with examples before I go out to see you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Sanchez.
Thank you.
Thank you. The chair would recognize Mr. Gonzalez for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and Mr. Secretary, welcome. I know that many of us supported your appointment and nomination confirmation, so it's great to see you here.
Thank you.
Nothing's an easy road in Washington, so.
Would the gentleman yield?
Of course.
When I first met the Undersecretary, the first word that came out of his mouth was Charlie Gonzalez. I yield back.
And the conversation continued regardless. Anyway, Mr. Secretary, well, first of all, I'll get the partisan stuff out of the way, because I know that my colleague from Texas Mr. Barton alluded to the creation of private sector jobs, and it's not all created by the government. And I will say this about the President administration. In the past month, I think about 35,000 plus government jobs were lost and 200,000 plus private sector jobs were created. I will say this, and I think the record will bear me out, that this administration's record as far as creating private sector jobs far exceeds that of the years 2000 to 2008. But I must say that beating the number 0 of net job creation between the years 2000 and 2008 shouldn't be all that hard to do. And we do have great challenges, and I'm hoping that we'll get past all this and figure out how we're going to get out of this tremendous recession that we still find ourselves in. In a minute, we're going to have the second panel, Mr. Secretary, and a couple of those witnesses, maybe 3. Of course, we'll have the chamber and we'll have think tank, but we're going to have business people, and they're going to obviously touch on what they sense or feel is the greatest challenge to them in finding markets and such. I have not read their testimony. I'm just assuming that will be the crux of the subject matter. What is your estimation? What do you think it is? What do you think they're going to tell us in the next hour or so?
Well, I think what the American business community tells us every day is that they understand the importance of exports, and they want to export more. And so in order to do that, we have to reduce trade barriers. Now, we're doing that certainly with trade agreements, which are a very important tool, but we do it in a lot of other ways as well. Harmonizing standards, regulatory cooperation, really putting a spotlight on corruption or the lack of intellectual property rights protection. These are issues that are of vital concern to the business community. We work very closely with them to try to reduce these non-tariff barriers every day. So I think they'll tell you that we need to get the 3 pending trade agreements completed. I think they will also tell you that the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which will also expand and benefit us in the Asia-Pacific region, needs to get done, and we're on track. We're hoping to have the framework for an agreement on that in November. And they'll also tell you we need to do the base hits. Trade agreements you might think of as home runs. Base hits are working every single day, resolving the trade barriers that Congressman Pompeo referred to that may affect one particular sector or in some cases one particular company. It's working on those issues that I mentioned country by country. I have the privilege of serving on the commercial dialogue with Brazil and another commercial dialogue with India where we raise these issues that create non-tariff barriers. Those are the base hits that we have to be hitting every day along with the bigger home runs like trade agreements.
Okay, thank you very much, and I would yield back the balance of my time.
I thank the gentleman. The chair recognizes the gentlelady from Tennessee, Ms. Blackburn, for her 5 minutes.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Secretary. Let's stay right there talking about these emerging markets, yes. Brazil, China, India. Tell me what you are doing to help our businesses. We've got lots. In Tennessee, our exports have increased tremendously. You know that this is an issue that's important to us, just like the intellectual property protections are important to us. And so since you raised Brazil, which is a market that we have our eyes on, talk to me about what ITA is doing on a daily basis to help businesses take advantage of opportunities that are there or to seek out and know where they can be competitive. How are you helping them target and drill down on these?
Thank you, Madam Congresswoman. Brazil is a very important market for us. It's one of our targeted emerging markets. We have a team of trade specialists in country in Brazil, as well as our domestic network that work with companies around the country to take advantage of the opportunities that exist. Let me give you a few in the infrastructure space. As you well know, Brazil is going to be host to the Olympics as well as the World Cup. It's estimated that Brazil will spend over $200 billion in infrastructure, and American companies are well positioned to support Brazil as they grow in that space. So we're working closely with the business community, promoting that. We have trade missions there. We have information available through our portal, our web portal, export.gov, and we will continue to focus on that. So on export promotion, we're disseminating information, taking trade missions, extending Gold Key services, which is a customized service that's extended on a fee basis for companies that want to go down there and have appointments already made for them so that they can hit the ground running. So we're doing a lot on the export promotion.
So you are facilitating the information dissemination and the awareness as well as the on-site, in-country relationship.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am. We're doing both.
All right, let me switch gears since I just have a little bit more time left. I want to look at the export initiative.
Yes.
And ask you a little bit about what steps the Bureau is taking to make certain that we avoid duplication and redundancies and duplication of efforts among other federal agencies. You know, this is something that we want to make certain we clean up a lot of the bureaucratic operational processes. So as we look at this, and you know Congress has not appropriated funding for this yet, what are you doing that is going to ensure that you get rid of some of these redundancies before you stand it up?
Well, let me highlight three things.
Okay.
First, we have the Trade Promotion Coordinating Committee. And that Trade Promotion Coordinating Committee has as its membership all of the agencies that have some role, even if it's a very small role, in export promotion. We meet regularly. We talk about what we're doing. We look for places to collaborate and cooperate. So, for example, under that effort, we recognize that our best use of the trade specialists that we have, both domestically and internationally, are for companies that are export ready. Companies that have already dipped their toe in the water and are exporting, although they may only be exporting to one market or two markets. So we have begun to focus on those companies. Now, there are a lot of companies that have never...
So you're focusing more on enabling growth rather than enabling entry.
ITA is focused on that. SBA, through this effort of making sure that we weren't doing duplication and maximizing our resources, we work with SBA, who now takes the lead on companies that have never exported before.
Okay.
So on the Trade Promotion Coordinating Committee is one. Number two, within ITA, we've looked at how we can streamline our own efforts and make it tighter. So we have a unit of manufacturing and services. Their mandate was quite broad, and we're looking at now streamlining that and focusing it just on sectors that have export potential. And then more broadly, as Congressman Butterfield alluded to, the President has directed his team to look at how we do export promotion and trade policy and see if we can't do it better, more effectively, and more efficiently. So on three levels, we're actively
Do you
engaged.
feel like in that process, and my time's nearly up, do you feel like in that process you're picking winners and losers, or no?
No, that's not our job. It isn't our job.
Okay,
But it
my
is
time's expired. I yield back.
Okay.
The chair recognizes the Chairman Emeritus of the full committee, the distinguished John Dingell.
Madam Chairman, thank you for your kindness, and I very much appreciate you holding this hearing. It is important leadership in a very important area. Thank you. I have an excellent statement, opening statement, which I have inserted in the record, and I hope everybody will read it. They will find it both enlightening and enjoyable. Now, Mr. Secretary, thank you for appearing before the committee today. I have a number of questions to ask you, which will, I think, be best answerable in a yes or no. And I will try and see that you have them in writing so that you may later make such additional comments as you find necessary. I want to tell you I'm a particular admirer of your department, particularly your Foreign Commercial Services Agency, and the market access and compliance operation that you have down there. These are very important to us in our trade, and I hope my colleagues on the committee will inform themselves of the work that they do in increasing American exports and improving our trade posture. President Obama recently announced that the Chorus FTA will create 70,000 jobs in the United States. Korean President Lee Myung-bak has announced that the deal will create 335,000 jobs in Korea in the next 10 years. Do you agree with these estimates?
First
yes
of all,
or no?
I just want to say thank you first for the kind comments about the International Trade Administration. I can't speak to the estimates by the Korean president, but yes, I do agree with the estimates and the impact on the U.S. Economy and employment.
You have no reason to challenge either side of
I have no reason to challenge, and I can completely support the American.
Secretary. The International Trade Commission's 2007 report on Chorus FTA, as amended in March 2010, indicated that the U.S. motor vehicles and parts trade deficit with Korea would increase between $1 billion and $1.3 billion annually if FTA was implemented. Does the Department of Commerce estimate this as well, yes or no?
I would need to look at that. I can't answer that.
But you have no reason to challenge those numbers at this time.
Not at this time.
I am troubled by the Chorus FTA's country of origin rules. Is it true that such rules permit a product from Korea with a minimum 35% Korean content to be considered as having originated in Korea for U.S. tariff purposes? Yes or no?
I'm not familiar with that provision, so I can't.
I believe it is so. Do you have any reason to challenge it?
Not at this time.
All right. Mr. Secretary, then for the sake of argument, is it possible, if that be true, that a Korean product with 65% Chinese content could be imported to the U.S. under the Chorus FTA's favorable tariff conditions? Yes or no?
If that provision is in place, I suspect that would be true.
Now, Mr. Secretary, I note that Chorus FTA, as amended last December, includes a provision that allows U.S. to snap back its tariffs on automobiles and light trucks if Korea violates the terms of FTA. Is it true that the agreement does not allow the U.S. to snap back to its original 25% tariff on light trucks? Yes or no?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not familiar with that provision, but I have no reason to challenge your statement.
Mr. Secretary, I appreciate your courtesy in the way you're responding. Further, Mr. Secretary, is it true that the snapback provision would allow Korea to reimpose an 8% tariff on U.S. vehicles, while the U.S. would be allowed to impose a tariff of only 2.5% on Korean passenger vehicles? Yes or no?
Once again, I'm not familiar with that specific provision, but have no reason to challenge your statement.
Mr. Secretary, I appreciate your courtesy. Finally, Commerce will bear significant responsibility in enforcing the terms of Chorus FTA. Will you do so? Will you commit that the Department of Commerce will do so vigorously, vigilantly, and fairly?
Yes.
Mr. Secretary, I want to thank you again for your appearance here. I want my colleagues to know the very great importance of the department of which you are part and the extraordinary good work you do in stimulating our trade efforts abroad, particularly the assistance that you give to small businesses and middle-sized businesses as they seek to increase their exports, and that your services in this particular are extraordinary. Madam Chairman, I think it would be useful if this committee were to take a look at that, because they do superb work in these areas, and they do not have the funds and the resources they need for producing the kind of benefits that they can produce if we provide them support. Again, Madam Chairman, I thank you for your courtesy and for your wisdom in this matter. Thank you.
I thank the gentleman, and the chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Kinzinger, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Again, Mr. Secretary, how are you? You've obviously heard this today, you know where we're coming at on this. One of the real disappointments I've had is just in the, I think the feeling that there's no real hurry to do anything in Colombia or Panama, or really this idea that we can't get it, we can't find out exactly what it is, but there's a hesitancy. I don't know if it's an attempt to satisfy base. I don't know what's going on, but there's really a hesitancy to do it. And I can tell you, in my own life, prior to coming here, I was and remain in the reserves, a pilot with the military, and I actually have been involved in some joint operations in the South. And I can tell you, they're a very strong ally of the United States, specifically Colombia I'm talking about now, Panama as well, but a very strong ally of the United States. And one of my concerns is, as we continue to kind of just limp along or dilly-dally and we don't pass this agreement, which was negotiated years ago now, I'm afraid that we begin to lose that support in Colombia, where the people begin to wonder, what's the hesitancy? Every moment that goes by that this agreement's not in place, that we're unable to export in a very strong way to these nations. Other countries like China, European nations are very quick to come in and pick up that vacuum, pick up that slack. And so I really feel that every moment that goes by, not in Colombia specifically I'm talking about now, we're losing, potentially the support of the people as they wonder what's happening. And we lose market export opportunities. Not to mention the fact of the role that a free trade agreement, or really a leveling of the playing field for us, what a free trade agreement would do in terms of just generally national defense, continuing to build that alliance in an area of the world where, frankly, American interests have begun to be challenged by many fronts, and especially on the eastern front of Colombia. So that's a concern I have. Well, let me ask you a few questions, and I guess I'll start with one first. You testified that the Korean Free Trade Agreement represents $10 billion in exports and 70,000 American jobs. In both that and the one with Panama and Colombia that have been sitting on the table, have there been any estimates so far about how much really has been left on the table by our failure to implement these trade agreements over the last few years? How many potentially exports, the export amount we've lost, or how many jobs have not been created because this has been sitting on the table for so long?
I know that with the Colombia trade agreement, it will, I can say forward-leaning. I can't speak to years past, but forward-leaning, it's estimated to increase exports by about $1 billion to that country. Panama, I think, slightly less than that. But let me just say, Congressman, that I agree with you completely in how important moving these trade agreements are. As with you, I have a history with Colombia as a businessman. And I recognize Colombia not only as a good friend and an ally, but as a strong commercial partner. So it's important to move forward on these.
Well, and so I think that's good because from what I'm hearing from you, it sounds like we're going to have enthusiastic cooperation from the administration here very soon over passing all three of these trade agreements, which I think would be great for the American economy, and I look forward to working in a bipartisan way with the administration on that. In your opinion, what are the biggest impediments right now to our global competitiveness for our business and our exports?
Well, let me put them in two categories. One is domestic. Only 1% of American businesses export. Compare this to Germany, 12% of their businesses export. So one challenge we have is getting the word out to American business, particularly small and medium-sized companies, that we can no longer look at our market as a community, a state, or...
Well, I think business knows that. I think we need to get that out continually, and I'd love to hear the administration continually talk about this to organize labor, to the American people about the importance of trade, and so go ahead.
Well, I think a lot of American business does, but I want to see more American businesses exporting. And then within that 1%, 58% of those companies only export to one market. So we need to do a better job of selling our goods and services abroad. Outside...
well, let me ask, because I'm almost out of time, what about corporate tax rates?
I think we need to look at everything that can have an impact on our competitiveness.
What about corporate tax rates specifically?
I think corporate tax rates should be looked at. I think they should absolutely be looked at.
Would you support reducing corporate tax rates so that we could reduce our cost overseas and be more competitive in the export market?
Well, I certainly support a review of what we need to do. How is that?
All right. Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from New York, Mr. Towns, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Let me thank you and the ranking member for having this hearing. I think it's a very important hearing, and you're doing it in a very timely fashion, and I like that as well. Let me ask you, since it's our job to analyze how trade barriers that are hurting American industry, will you develop an analysis of the impact that current visa processing procedures and visa interview delays in key growth markets like Brazil, China, and India are having on travel to the United States, and provide it to this committee?
Congressman, you raise an important issue, and happy to provide information that could be useful to you and to this committee. What I can say about that issue is that my boss, Secretary Locke, heard an earful from American business all over the country. He then raised this with Secretary of State Clinton. He also heard about concerns when people come to our borders and entry points. So from those conversations, a working group has been established between Commerce, State, and Homeland Security to focus on visa and entry issues. We use that working group to gather information from the business community and make sure that State Department and Homeland Security knows about these issues. We also use it as a dissemination of information to the business community. So we're aware that this is a problem that we can solve ourselves, and we're working on it and working very closely with State and Homeland Security.
So we don't need the Congress to do anything.
Well, I wouldn't say that. What I would say that we will provide you any useful information that we've gathered, particularly in the last year and a half that we have been working closely with those two agencies on this issue.
Right. In your testimony, you use that you will use all the tools in our toolbox. Would be an important tool in our toolbox. You know, what tools do we have in that box?
Well, we have a lot of tools. On the export promotion side, we took 35 trade missions last year, record-setting number, had 400 companies participate in it. We also have an international buyers program where we bring, last year we brought 13,000 foreign buyers to our shores to trade shows. Then we connected them with American businesses where sales were made. We provide market analysis. We have a gold key service, which is a fee-based services for companies that want us to help them identify the right distributors or potential buyers, and we arrange their meetings for them in country. So that's on the export promotion side, a sample of services. On the policy side, we focus on non-tariff trade barriers and try to work with the business community on identifying them, putting a spotlight on those barriers, and then working with our trade partners to reduce them.
Right. In your testimony, you also indicated that we are doing our part to keep America globally competitive and implement President Obama's National Export Initiative. What are some of the things you're actually doing?
Well, one is certainly reducing trade barriers abroad. The more barriers we can reduce, the more competitive we will be. On the domestic side, the President is committed to the R&D tax credit and making that permanent. One of the greatest competitive advantages we have around the world is we invest more in research and development than any other nation in the world. We need to continue to do that, and the R&D tax credit will go a long way to helping that happen.
Right. Now, just before I yield back, let me thank you for the work that you're doing. And
thank you, Congressman.
I really, really appreciate it. And I think that you're moving in the right direction. If there's anything that we need to do on this side of the aisle, I think you just need to voice it, because I think more and more people are beginning to realize, you know, how important it is to improve in terms of our trade and strengthen our relationship, you know, across the board, and that realizing that there is a correlation between unemployment and crime. We have to recognize that, and I think that more and more people realize it, and that we hope to be able to move those trade barriers to be able to move forward. On that note, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. The chair recognizes Mr. Guthrie for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for coming today. I appreciate that. I know you mentioned tourism earlier, and that's a great industry. We have people coming here. I think it's important. I guess I didn't think of it so much as exports, but it is great when people are here, and I hear somebody walking around with a foreign accent out here, I'll stop and talk to them because I'm proud to show off our great capital city to them and appreciate them being here. But I was thinking, I remember being in another country somewhere I won't mention, but standing in this grand marketplace, great buildings, castle there, the whole, just fantastic. And they were talking about the great ships that came in and out of the harbor. And it dawned on me, I said, I was standing there, so you know what, their biggest industry now is selling the history of when they were a great power. And that's something that we need to make sure that as we stand, I mean, that was their number one industry, was people coming to see the great buildings built when it was a great power. And we have to just be mindful as we're here. And in Brazil in the late 90s, I believe it might have been mid-90s to late 90s, had financial issues, deficit problems, and took some tough medicine. They were willing to take the tough medicine. And the president at the time, Cardoso, led that effort they have the same kind of federal system we have. And look where they are now. I think the benefits of that have paid off tremendously. It's a wonderful country, a great place to be. 180 million people, maybe somewhere around that.
I think over 190.
Over 190 now, and it is. But I do know there are trade barriers between Brazil. I know the president's either going or is there. Yes. And what's going on with Brazil in particular?
Well, it's certainly one of our targeted emerging markets. As you've pointed out, Brazil, many years ago, Brazil was called the sleeping giant. Mm-hmm. Well, it's awoken, and it is a tremendous opportunity for American business, but also has challenges, both tariff and non-tariff barriers. As I mentioned earlier, I have the privilege of co-chairing the commercial dialogue with Brazil. That's the vehicle we use to raise trade issues. Mm-hmm. And so we've done everything from trying to get them to open up their express delivery service. Express delivery is very important for our small and medium-sized companies who don't have their own in-house logistics operations, and we've made progress there. We're working with them on harmonizing standards in a number of sectors, but in particular in alternative energy, because we see a great opportunity to boost our efforts there. We are working closely to bring our smart grid technology to Brazil. So we're working on a number of fronts to create opportunities, and as I mentioned earlier, we're doing a lot of export promotion in the infrastructure area because Brazil will be making significant investments in that sector over the next 6-7 years.
And that's all good. Also, just the product manufacturing to ship in is something that's interesting. On the export initiative that's coming out of the White House, is it solely focused on tariff barriers, or are you trying to make ways to make businesses more competitive? I know you talked about the research credit, but when you talk to businesses now, they're just concerned about the regulatory environment. We had an issue yesterday. We were hearing in the full committee about energy costs that it could come because of the way the EPA is regulating. I know in Kentucky, manufacturing energy, that gives us our competitive advantage in Kentucky compared to other countries because we have low energy prices. And a lot of businesses are just concerned not just about getting into countries and finding out opportunities, but being competitive because of the regulatory structure that's coming down. I don't know if you guys are looking. Is this just a Commerce Department initiative, or are you looking at?
No, the National Export Initiative is a government-wide initiative specifically on regulations. The President has directed his administration to look at regulations and then how they affect our competitiveness. And Commerce participates in that review. We don't even get involved in every regulatory review, but those that have significant economic impact. And then finally, looking at regulations abroad that affect our competitiveness is something we take a very active role in as well.
Yeah. And just finally, I'm about out of time. The three initiatives, trade initiatives together we've discussed today, if they were moving together, why would that, I don't know if you said it or maybe I've read, that the administration says that would put all three in jeopardy if they move together? Do you find that to be the case if we were to prove all three at the same time?
You know, I'm not aware of who said that, but what I can tell you is this. I know we have one that's ready to go now. Mm-hmm. And as Ambassador Kirk said, I think in recent testimony, if we're a company and we have a product ready to go, we had to take that product to market. So we're going to do that. The other two, I think we're close. We're working very, very hard. There's been a lot of activity with both Panama and Colombia. Mm-hmm. I know the President is committed to getting them to Congress. And so I would say let us finish up the work we have to do on these other two. We're working them. There have been meetings. In fact, there are meetings going on, I believe, today with Colombian officials and U.S. officials. and let us move with a product we have ready, which is Korea.
All right, thanks. I'll yield back.
Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes Mr. Harper for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good to see you, Mr. Sanchez. Thank you for being
Congressman.
here. I know you'd rather be getting a root canal right now than having to come join us, but we thank you for your time and patience with us today.
So far, it just feels like filling a cavity. It doesn't
That's
quite
it.
feel
That's
like a
good.
root
That's
canal.
good. Well, hopefully it won't get any worse than that. Mr. Sanchez, I wanted to talk to you about an issue that I believe just happened very recently, perhaps yesterday, when the Commerce Department announced the final determination in an administrative review of the anti-dumping duty order against frozen fish fillets from Vietnam. Of course, this announcement, as you know, represented a reversal from a preliminary determination that your agency announced, I believe, just last September. This decision seems to be at odds with your stated mission of improving the competitiveness of U.S. industry and taking appropriate steps against unfair trade. What's most concerning to me is the apparently perhaps political nature of the decision your agency announced yesterday. I understand that just after last September's preliminary determination, the Vietnamese significantly stepped up the diplomatic pressure on the Commerce Department. Further, I understand that this diplomatic pressure culminated with a meeting only a few weeks ago, very late in the administrative review process between you and the Vietnamese government. I also understand that when the U.S. industry requested a meeting with you to present their side of the case, you were personally unavailable or unable to make room on your schedule. And then I also understand that in just a couple of weeks, perhaps in early April, you plan to lead a trade mission to Vietnam. Now, I believe that's a good thing. You know, that's certainly an important thing for you to do, to lead a trade mission to Vietnam. However, I am concerned that this recent decision perhaps may have been political in nature and that it has been made to the detriment of a U.S. industry and, of course, thousands of workers in that industry. So I'd ask if you could help this committee better understand how the department reached this final decision.
Congressman, I take my role as enforcing our trade laws very, very seriously. I think it's one of the most important things we can do is to make sure we are creating a level playing field at home for American business. I can assure you, I can look you and this committee in the eye and say that this decision was made based on the statute that we have to follow, and based on the facts in the record. Politics played zero role in this decision. In this particular case, the preliminary decision was because Vietnam is a non-market economy, we have to look at other markets to determine our evaluation of whether or not there's dumping going on. In the preliminary finding, we looked at the Philippines. Subsequent to that preliminary finding, we reviewed the record and based on the information in the record determined that Bangladesh was a more appropriate analogous market. This was based on what was brought in by the petitioners as well as those defending, that is the Vietnamese, and based on that it was determined by our staff that Bangladesh was the more appropriate market. Upon doing that, that changed the calculation. But let me just close by saying enforcing our trade laws are absolutely critical. I do that with great pride. There were no political considerations taken in making this decision. We followed the statute and we used the facts as were presented.
When this change was made, when you were looking at the surrogate market economy, so previously, let's say back to September of 2010, before that, which country was used?
I believe it was the Philippines.
Okay, and then the change was made, was that September of 2010 that the change was made?
I can't hold me to the dates.
But the change was made to Bangladesh.
Correct.
Did you get a pushback from the Vietnamese government on making that change?
I got no pushback on any change, and we wouldn't have, if we had gotten a pushback, it wouldn't have made a difference. The only thing that would make a difference is the facts that are presented to us, what makes the most sense as we apply the statute.
Okay. You understand our concern,
I
though,
absolutely
the appearance
understand.
and the timing and some of those events that took place. We just needed to get a better explanation on that.
I understand.
With that, I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. The chair recognizes Dr. Cassidy for 5 minutes.
Hello, sir.
Hello, Congressman.
I'm struck as I look at Can you just speculate on the potential benefits to our export of products such as rice if we complete that Colombia Free Trade Agreement?
I can't speak specifically to rice, but I can speak without any hesitation that the trade agreement would be very, very good for American business. And the President fully supports getting that completed and getting it to Congress. I can tell you that I'd like to see it completed because it'll help me in my job doubling exports by 2014, as the President pointed out.
Now, there's been concern from folks, some folks, that Colombia's human rights record is such that we should not have that free trade agreement. Do you have any assessment of that?
Well, my understanding is that the issues that we're focused on are certain provisions in the Colombian Labor Code and concern about violence toward labor organizers and the impunity that happens when violence occurs, that people literally have gotten away with murder. What I can say is that the Colombian government is a strong collaborator in confronting these issues and working with us to address those concerns. We have been meeting with them. There's been a lot of activity over the last 6 weeks, I'd say. And I think that both the Colombian government and our team are committed to working through the concerns we have, finding a solution, and getting this to Congress as soon as possible.
Not to put words in your mouth, but it's my general sense that there's been dramatic improvement in that record over the last decade.
I think there has been. I have a personal history with Colombia, and I would agree with you. I think there have been improvements, and I'm particularly impressed with the Santos administration, the current administration, that has taken great steps to focus on, particularly on this issue that concerns us. In addition to that, the Vice President of Colombia was a 20-year labor leader, and he's a strong proponent of the free trade agreement.
So some of the criticism was that the violence was particularly directed towards labor unions, so the fact that he's a labor leader and also a leader in their government, I presume, is particularly significant.
Well, I think he's a strong voice to underscore that he's going to pay attention to the concerns that we've raised, and they actually have taken a lot of steps since August when they took.
Let me interrupt just because I have limited time.
Sure.
Now, what I'm about to ask is kind of sociological in nature, so you may defer. It's my general impression, though, that as countries become bigger trading partners, they become more prosperous, and as they become more prosperous, there's more employment opportunities for folks rather than to be a mule to bring cocaine across the border. So do you know if there's a body of literature that suggests that as a country becomes more prosperous, they're less likely to resort in international criminal activity?
I'm not familiar with any body of literature that focuses on that, but what I can tell you is that I believe that a Colombia trade agreement will be good for our country.
Now, let me ask you, changing subjects, my district, Louisiana, Baton Rouge area, has a lot of petrochemical plants. When I was looking over our exports to Korea, and we have apparently lost many of our petrochemical imports to China. Now, is that a function of China just having proximity? Is it a function of China, not having the same environmental regulations and so that they can lower their cost of production because they can potentially pollute with impunity? Or is it because, no, these tariffs are actually the barrier, and if we eliminate these tariffs, whatever else is there, we will overcome it?
I believe it's probably a combination of many of the things that you mentioned. What I do know is by ratifying this agreement, we will put our American companies in a much better competitive position, and I believe it'll help and benefit companies in Louisiana as well as other states around the country.
It's been my general impression that if we do a value-added product, oftentimes the Chinese don't do that well. They do the commodity generic product, but the value-added they don't. But of course, the value-added is the most value.
Well, what I would say, and I think we will agree on this, is that when you lower barriers, both tariff and non-tariff, we can compete with anybody in the world.
Okay.
And I believe that that those companies in Louisiana will be well served by the Korea trade agreement.
I'll add to that our workers can outcompete with anybody.
I agree with you.
I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman.
Chair recognizes Mr. McKinley for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Sorry I'm late.
That's
We
okay.
got a meeting downstairs going, and I'm splitting my time. It's just,
I heard I have competition.
several of us are trying to, so I apologize on time. But I've got just a series of things. I'm coming from the northern section of West Virginia, and you have a representative there in our district that's helping out. But I've had conversations with him, and he's very frustrated with what's happening long term. But we have the last American manufacturer of China is existing in the northern district, Homer Laughlin, China, and he's holding on. He's got 900 union jobs, and he's struggling, and he's looking for help. And apparently we can't help him with the tariffs. He's the last one. He's up against all the countries that we have free trade with, and he's losing. He can't keep up.
In the Chinese market, or you're talking about generally?
Always China. He makes Fiesta ware. So one of his main products you'll see across America is Fiesta ware. But he's competing with India, Vietnam, Indonesia, Japan, China, and he's struggling. And I don't have answers for him. But when I asked him what could we do to help, he said, just give me some tariff protection, and I can compete with them. But with the fact that he has to work with so many of the EPA requirements for air and water quality against people that are not and paying a living wage, it's very difficult for him. So I would like to have some direction how we could help Homer Laughlin, China, to get through all this, because I've seen the demise. We had in the northern section of West Virginia, we had a chemical industry that once was very vibrant, now gone. The glass industry, we had Fenton, Fostoria, Viking glass, all gone because of imports. I don't want to see Homer Laughlin go the same way. In fact, we're trying to hold on to those. So you can see there's a general problem I have with our free trade, where we're going with that. We have a steel industry that they used to have 30,000. We have two steel companies, Weirton Steel and Wheeling-Pittsburgh Steel, with 30,000 steel workers just 15, 20 years ago. Now we have less than 2,000. And when you speak to them about it, it's all about imports, where China and Japan have dumped their steel in America, but it is so costly and so time-consuming to get litigation, they just give it up. So we're down now to 2,000, with the prospects of them finally just shutting the doors after a long and very illustrious history and full employment where families have been counting on that. And then we have Marble King down in Paden City, West Virginia, the largest manufacturer of marble products in the country. She's struggling against imports that are coming in that are unfairly priced, and she's been told by everyone she has to take it before the whatever, is it the WTO or what? See, I can't afford to do that. She's just a small operation. What are small companies supposed to do? Do we have a mentality that if you're a U.S. Steel or Weirton Steel, you can handle it, but these small companies are struggling. Homer Laughlin, with just 900 employees, they're struggling. What can we do to help them?
Well, Congressman, in that particular case, if you'll get me contact information, I'll make sure that our team.
Could you have your staff contact us?
I would be happy to, and we will reach out
whoever that right
to them.
person is, so that I'm just not sending it something in a vacuum. Because
Yes.
they said they've reached out and they're hearing nothing back. So
Well, count on it. We will reach out to them, and we'll sit down with them and see how we can be of help. For the broader issue, there's no question that some communities are disadvantaged by trade agreements. Those communities, we need to give them help, and we have programs in place. The Trade Adjustment Assistance Program, one that President Obama is promoting from our department, is the Economic Adjustment Assistance Program that helps workers, companies, and communities. We can't leave communities behind as we pursue these agreements.
We feel left behind.
And so we need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to help as the world marketplace changes and affects some communities very positively and others quite negatively. So any way that we can help that your community, count on us to be there to do that, and our staff will reach out to your staff specifically to work on helping this company that you mentioned.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Congressman.
All right, the chair would like to recognize Mr. Olson for 5 minutes.
That's okay.
Excuse the gentleman, please turn your microphone on.
Oh, I apologize.
It's all right.
There you go. Thank you very much. Again, sir, I'm from Texas, and I want to ask you about the beef industry and the impact of the Korean Free Trade Agreement upon that industry. As you know, Texas produces 14% of the total U.S. cattle and 16% of the total U.S. beef cows. And under this free trade agreement, we're slapped with a 40% tariff before this beef from Texas, American beef, reaches Korean soil. And you know, that is not something we need to get rid of that tariff. No, I mean, I understand that the agreement does get rid of that, and I ask you to stick to that because it's important for our country. Also, Australia is very close to finalizing their agreement, and they are a large beef producer as well. And can I go back to the beef producers in my state and tell them that this administration is going to fight for them, going to end that 40% tariff, and get American beef in South Korea?
Congressman, what I can tell you is that one of the reasons that we didn't bring the Korea trade agreement forward sooner is that we were working on that very issue. So we're very much aware of the impact of tariffs on the beef industry. It's probably still not perfect, but it's far better. And we will continue to fight once it's ratified to make sure the implementation of this agreement makes good on the commitments that were made on beef.
Yes, sir, I appreciate that. As I understand it, the original tariffs were put on our beef because of mad cow disease. And obviously that's not a factor right now. That was something that was a viable argument maybe 5, 10 years ago. And so again, it's very important for my beef producers back home that we have a fair market there in Korea. It's a big market, and we want that market to be a U.S. market, not an Australian market.
Got it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Yield back my
Congressman.
time.
All right, seeing no other members present, I'd like to just thank you very much, Mr. Secretary, for your time today. You've been very gracious, and just to say to you that it is our plan to work with you and Secretary Locke and the successor of whoever might have that next post to move our country forward and really make Made in America matter again. So thank you for your time. And at this point, we're going to take a brief little, maybe 2 or 3 minute recess as we reset the table. And again, thank you. We hope you're back again soon and often.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be with you. I really appreciate it and look forward to working with all of you and expanding export of American products and services. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. Good to meet you. Can I just write down the name of that? Can I write down the name of that company?
Homer Lockland.
Homer Lockland.
And also the other Marble King.
Homer Lockland.
Homer Lockland and
Marble King. Thank you.
All right. On our second panel, we have, as you can see, 5 witnesses. Our first witness is Robert W. Holliman II, President and Chief Executive Officer of the Business Software Alliance. Welcome. Our second witness is, okay, not in order, but another witness is Daniel Eikenson, Associate Director of the Center for Trade Policy Studies at the Cato Institute. Welcome. Also testifying today is John Murphy, Vice President, International Affairs for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. We also have Jack J. Pelton, President, Chairman, and CEO of Cessna Aircraft Corporation. And finally, we have James Krause, Executive Vice President of Sales and Marketing for the Capstone Turbine Corporation. Welcome to each of you. You will each be given 5 minutes to make your testimony. To keep track of time, there are timers on either side. If you need to slide them down so you have a better view of them, feel free to do that. When you see the yellow light, you're down to 1 minute. And when it hits red, if you could briefly sum up your remarks, I would appreciate it very much. So we're going to recognize Mr. Holliman first for 5 minutes. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Madam Chairman, Mr. Ranking Member, members of this subcommittee, it's indeed a pleasure to be with you today. This is all about creating jobs and what's the link between U.S. export policy and American jobs. And the software industry certainly knows from experience how to do that, and we think there's some lessons that can apply to the broader economy. Software contributes a $36 billion trade surplus to the U.S. We employ nearly 2 million Americans at twice the national average wage. And there's one simple thing that would allow us to contribute even more and have broader impacts in the U.S. economy, and that's to reduce software theft. For us, you see, the challenge is not how to encourage businesses and other countries to use American software. They are already using it in overwhelming numbers. But too often, they are not paying for it. And so stopping illegal software use will certainly create jobs for the software industry, but it will also create jobs in the rest of the American economy, and let me explain that. Software is an essential tool of production, and nearly every company and business at every sector relies on software to create products and to do business. That includes everything from manufacturing to transportation to financial services. In the U.S., 80% of businesses pay for their software. In contrast, in countries like China, where 80% of the businesses do not pay for their software, the result is an unfair competitive advantage. For companies who are operating in countries that use software to run their operations but don't pay for it, they then have an ability to undercut U.S. companies who do, by and large, pay for their software. And this unfair competition undermines U.S. products, U.S. sales, U.S. exports, and displaces U.S. jobs far outside of the software industry. More than $50 billion of software is installed illegally around the world, and this problem is fastest growing in large emerging markets like China, where the PC market is exploding and the software sales are not tracking. Microsoft, one of our members, commissioned a study by a Dartmouth economist who estimated that eliminating piracy in China for Microsoft products alone would create as many as 60,000 new jobs throughout the U.S. economy. And of course, this would be expanded significantly when extended to other companies. The U.S. government has a variety of trade tools at their disposal to secure better protection overseas, and we believe they must be used. But to maintain our leverage in negotiations with trade partners, we also have to lead by example in this country. Federal agencies already require the use of legal software within the federal government. But we must also extend this to the next logical step to ensure that federal contractors are also using legal software. The U.S. Intellectual Property Enforcement Coordinator, Victoria Espinel, is exploring that very idea and others as part of her Joint Strategic Plan on IP Enforcement. And Madam Chairman, I want to thank you for your role in co-sponsorship and helping create through the IP Act, the Pro-IP Act, that position, which has been enormously important domestically and internationally. But this Congress, with the administration, have an even more important role. That is to keep up the pressure on every country that is using illegal software, because it not only hurts the software industry, but it hurts businesses more broadly. And I would use China as the recent example, where Congress weighed in quite strongly about the unfair competitive advantage that exists because of the use of illegal software in that country, where President Obama raised directly with President Hu Jintao that issue on multiple meetings. We now have good commitments in place, but unfortunately I will report that we have not yet seen any measurable increase in sales of legitimate software by our companies as a result. And I think we know and share with you, as we do with the administration, that the ultimate test is not the commitments, but the ultimate test is whether we see an increased sales and exports of U.S. software in these high-value markets that will benefit not only software jobs, but it will better level the playing field between all sectors of the U.S. economy. So thank you for this opportunity to testify.
Thank you. And Mr. Murphy, you're recognized now for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon. Madam Chairman, Bono Mack, Ranking Member Butterfield, it is a pleasure and a welcome opportunity for me to testify before the subcommittee today. For the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, no priority facing our nation is more important than putting Americans back to work. With nearly 9% of the workforce unemployed, the biggest policy challenge we face over the next decade is to create the 20 million jobs that we need to replace the jobs lost in the recession and to meet the needs of our growing workforce. With booming demand overseas for U.S. goods and services, we believe that trade can play a vital role in reaching this goal. The opportunities are immense. Already, more than 50 million Americans are employed by firms that engage in international trade. 1 in 3 manufacturing jobs depends on exports, and 1 in 3 acres on American farms is planted for hungry consumers overseas. Nor is trade just for big companies. More than 97% of the 250,000 U.S. companies that export are small and mid-sized firms. But for companies large and small, the chief obstacle to reaching the goal of doubling U.S. exports by 2014 is the complex array of foreign barriers to American exports. Those barriers are alive and well. For example, Colombia's effective tariff on imports from the United States averages 14% for manufactured goods and is even higher for agricultural products. By contrast, the average U.S. tariff last year imposed on imports from Colombia was 0.1%. Historically, the only way the U.S. government has ever enticed a foreign government to open its market to American exports is by negotiating free trade agreements to eliminate them on a reciprocal basis. This is just what will be achieved by the FTAs with Colombia, Panama, and South Korea. These are pro-growth agreements that will create good American jobs, bolster important allies, and confirm American leadership around the world. Such agreements have a proven record of success. Between 2003 and 2008, for example, U.S. exports rose by 79%, their fastest growth in nearly 2 decades. It's no coincidence that this period also saw the U.S. implement free trade agreements with 10 countries and saw earlier agreements, such as NAFTA, attain their full implementation with the elimination of all tariffs on U.S. goods entering Canada and Mexico. Recognizing these benefits, countries are rushing to negotiate new trade accords, but America is being left behind. According to the World Trade Organization, there are 283 regional trade agreements in force around the globe today, but the United States has just 11 such agreements covering 17 countries. There are more than 100 such agreements currently under negotiation among our trading partners. Unfortunately, the United States is participating in just one of these. the United States is standing on the sidelines while other nations clinch new trade deals. For example, the European Union has ratified an FTA with South Korea, and Canada has done so with Colombia. Both of those agreements are expected to enter force by July 1st. If Washington delays further, U.S. exporters will be put at a marked competitive disadvantage in Colombia, Panama, and South Korea. According to a study by the U.S. Chamber, the United States will lose more than 380,000 jobs and $40 billion in export sales if it fails to implement the pending trade agreements, while the European Union and Canada move forward with their own agreements. Unfortunately, this is already happening. The U.S. share of Colombia's import market for agricultural products fell from about 3/4 in 2008 to about 1/4 last year, after Bogota implemented a new trade deal with its South American neighbors. In the interest of time, I will simply refer the committee to my written testimony, where I have also addressed the importance of defending intellectual property at home and abroad, and I'd like to associate myself with the remarks of Mr. Holliman in that regard. It's also important to modernize export controls, as the Obama administration has begun to do in a very positive initiative. It's also critical to develop a tax system that incentivizes investment and job creation here in the United States. In conclusion, the United States needs a laser-like focus on opening foreign markets. We need to approve the pending trade agreements and negotiate more of them, including the Trans-Pacific Partnership and an ambitious Doha Round agreement. Also, Congress should renew the traditional trade negotiating authority that every president since FDR has enjoyed. If we stand still on trade, we fall behind. At stake is the standing of the United States in the world and our best hopes for escaping high unemployment, massive deficits, and exploding entitlements. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce looks forward to working with the members of the committee to forge a trade agenda that will create jobs, opportunity, and growth here in the United States. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Pelton, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Bono Mack, Ranking Member Butterfield, and members of the subcommittee. My name is Jack Pelton. I'm Chairman, President, and CEO of Cessna Aircraft Company. Cessna is the world's largest general aviation manufacturer in the world based on sales units. And since its inception in 1927, Cessna has delivered more than 192,000 airplanes, virtually to every country in the world. Cessna also is one of the 70 member companies of the General Aviation Manufacturers Association, which represents the world's leading manufacturers of general aviation aircraft, engines, avionics, and components. General aviation is an important contributor to the U.S. economy. It supports more than 1.2 million jobs. It's providing more than $150 billion in economic activity, and in 2010 generated $5 billion in exports. We are one of the few remaining manufacturing industry that still provides a significant trade surplus for the United States. These exports accounted for 62% of the billings generated by general aviation manufacturers, significantly up from 50% of the billings attributed to exports in 2009. Cessna, like many other companies, is coping with the realities of a weak economy. Since late 2008, we had to lay off nearly 8,000 employees out of our 16,000 that we employed before the recession. The three major manufacturers in Wichita alone have been experiencing significant declines in sales in recent years. In 2010 alone, Bombardier Learjet was down 29%, Hawker Beechcraft was down 22%, and Cessna was down 28%. We do believe the market is stabilizing as we see an increase in orders in some segments of our industry. The tax bill that was passed in 2010 will be very helpful to our industry by extending the research and development tax credits and allowing 100% expensing for capital investments like aircraft, avionics, engines, and cabin equipment. Cessna fully supports the current efforts to reform, streamline, and overhaul the export licensing and policy framework. As an aircraft manufacturer, we have found that we have a generally positive export environment for our physical products, aircraft, spares, ground support equipment. However, ITAR in many cases is a problem for our utility and special missions aircraft sales. These aircraft do not contain sensitive military systems and are functionally equivalent to commercial aircraft and do not provide significant military or intelligence impact. Yet many of our export existing controls and policies have slowed our globalization and have slowed our sales efforts. Due to the high safety standards we adhere to in the United States, manufacturers cannot sell aircraft or major aircraft parts unless they're certified by the Federal Aviation Administration. This means that the financial health and competitiveness of the U.S. manufacturers in the global market depends in large part on the ability of the FAA to do its job. Unfortunately, we're concerned that the FAA will be unable to meet certification requests by manufacturers in the U.S. unless the FAA is provided adequate resources and implements new processes and procedures to streamline the certification process. We believe it will not be able to keep up with the demand by manufacturers, and this will severely diminish the competitiveness of the U.S. industry and its ability to bring new products to the global market and create new jobs in the economy. There is, however, a mechanism already in place that can help manage the resources demands on the FAA. For aircraft certification, the FAA established Organization Designation Authorization, referred to as ODA, in 2006. This allows the FAA to delegate routine certification tasks, such as the review and approval of thousands of individual drawings and tests. Most of the U.S. manufacturers have invested in the development of the ODA system that has been approved by the FAA, but unfortunately, the certification process efficiencies have yet to be realized by our industry. Aircraft financing in this new economic climate remains a challenge. The availability of credit continues to be a constraint on exports, and Cessna has worked very hard to create a $500 million facility backed by the Export-Import Bank of the United States. This facility has assisted Cessna with exports over the past couple years when liquidity in the market has been very tight. We do applaud the Export-Import Bank for working with us to deliver creative solutions that support our export needs. Madam Chairman, if government and industry work together on the issues discussed here today, then we will help ensure that our country stays ahead of the pack, economically and technologically, in the years ahead. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today.
Thank you, Mr. Pelton. Mr. Atkinson, you're ready for 5 minutes.
Good morning, Chairman.
Can you check that button, please, on that mic?
There we go. My name is Dan Eikenson. I'm Associate Director of the Center for Trade Policy Studies at the Cato Institute. I'm pleased to be here today to share my views on manufacturing, jobs, and trade. Expanding trade has been an important source of U.S. job growth historically. In the quarter century between 1983 and 2007, as real GDP more than doubled and the real value of U.S. trade increased fivefold, the U.S. economy created 46 million net new jobs. That's 1.84 million net new jobs per year. And just to be clear, when I say expanding trade, I mean expanding exports and imports. It is important to note that it's exports and imports that support U.S. jobs up and down the supply chain through various channels. I think people generally understand that exports contribute to economic growth, which is essential to job creation, but many then make the mistake of concluding if exports help grow the economy and create jobs, then imports must shrink the economy and cost jobs. Trade is thus viewed as a competition between our producers who employ us and their producers who employ them. I think that's the wrong way to look at trade. In the 21st century, it is inaccurate to characterize international trade as a competition between us and them. Because of foreign direct investment, joint ventures, and other equity sharing arrangements, quite often we are they, and they are we. Just apply that question to the U.S. auto and steel industries. As a result of the proliferation of disaggregated transnational production and supply chains, we and they often collaborate in the same endeavor. There is competition between supply chains, but success first demands cooperation within those supply chains. And this reality, I think, demands policies that are welcoming of imports and foreign investment. A recent study by the Asian Development Bank Institute found that just a tiny fraction of the cost of producing the Apple iPhone is Chinese value added. The only Chinese input is labor, which is used to assemble the components manufactured in other countries. The value of that labor accounts for about $6.50, or 3.6% of the $179 it costs to produce the total iPhone. The other 96.4% of the total cost is components produced in other countries, including the United States. Most of the iPhone's value, however, accrues to Apple, which reaps the lion's share of the approximately 100% markup. And that markup goes to retailers, distributors, marketers, and other firms in the supply chain, as well as to Apple, which distributes some to shareholders and retains some for research and development, which supports engineering and design jobs higher up the value chain so as to continue the virtuous circle. So even though only about $6.50 of that iPhone is Chinese value, the entire $179 cost is chalked up as an import from China because that was the product's final point of assembly. That added $1.9 billion to the U.S. trade deficit with China in 2009. But should we lament a trade deficit in iPhones or any other products assembled abroad, particularly when those products comprise U.S. value added and support high-paying U.S. jobs? Legions of American workers and their factories, offices, and laboratories would be idled without access to foreign workers and foreign factories. Without access to lower-cost labor, countless ideas hatched in U.S. labs, which became viable commercial products that support hundreds of thousands of U.S. jobs in engineering, design, marketing, logistics, retailing, finance, accounting, and manufacturing, might never have made it beyond conception. Countless U.S. jobs up and down the value chain depend on imports from China, but imports support U.S. employment through many other channels as well. According to the Bureau of Economic Analysis, intermediate goods and capital equipment accounted for 55% of U.S. import value last year. These are products purchased by producers, not consumers. So imports help reduce the cost of production, enabling producers to better compete and support U.S. jobs and wages. The 45% of imports that are consumer goods support U.S. jobs in logistics, transportation, wholesaling, retailing, and aftermarket services industries. And by helping to keep prices lower and quality higher, imports allow consumers to have more resources with which to purchase other products and services, both of which support U.S. jobs. The Obama administration, as we heard this morning, has offered an answer to the question implicit in this hearing. Its National Export Initiative aims to double U.S. exports in 5 years by reducing and eliminating various administrative, regulatory, and financial obstacles faced by U.S. exporters. That plan includes some laudable components, which I fully support. The idea of streamlining export controls makes a lot of sense. It's likely to lead to export growth. Wrapping up the three pending bilateral trade agreements, the Doha round, the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, those will clearly all lead to increased exports. But there are other aspects of the NEI that I find troubling. First of all, it completely ignores the import side of the equation. It's silent on the fact that importers bear costs related, that U.S. exporters are producers before they're exporters, and as producers they do a lot of importing. And there are many other ways to reduce their costs, including through streamlining various regulations.
Can you please wrap up your overtime limit?
Yes. I'll just conclude by saying a serious plan to boost U.S. economic growth and hiring should start by identifying all policies, regulations, practices, and conditions that impede U.S. competitiveness, not just those obstacles that confront U.S. companies as exporters. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Krause, 5 minutes.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm Jim Krause with...
They're very fickle microphones. Sometimes the button doesn't cooperate. There you go.
Okay.
Thank you.
With Capstone Microturbine, a manufacturer in Chatsworth, California. A microturbine is a small combustion turbine used to generate electricity at the location of an end-use customer. Capstone turbines are used as range extenders in hybrid electric vehicles, as well as stationary power for a host of customers, from hotels to hospitals to industrial customers on a global basis. As a leading manufacturer of microturbine energy systems, Capstone has valuable insight into what it takes to compete globally in a growing industry characterized by technological change and innovation. Although we were invited to testify on behalf of the chairwoman and ranking member, our power generation systems can be found in almost every state in the U.S. Customers use our systems mainly to save money by increasing their energy efficiency. By utilizing exhaust from the turbine to make hot or chilled water, businesses can cut their energy costs by up to 50%. The use of both electricity and thermal energy simultaneously from a single fuel source is called combined heat and power, or cogeneration. Some of our systems also provide cooling, known as CCHP. Microturbines produce very little criteria pollutants, as well as very little greenhouse gases. Capstone's unique technology makes clean, efficient combustion possible. We are able to use fossil fuels, including abundant natural gas, in a clean, efficient manner. Other systems that we manufacture burn biogas or methane from landfills or digesters. In these applications, we're renewable energy. Our customers can be found all over the world in a variety of industries. Oil and gas companies use our product to power their installations, oftentimes in remote locations. Oil and gas customers prize reliability, and a microturbine is highly reliable since it has only one moving part, does not require lubrication or coolants, and has only one maintenance interval per year. Additionally, generating power with microturbines can eliminate their need for air permitting as we design our product to meet the most stringent air standards in the world, California Air Resources Board standards. Our CCHP and CHP customers typically are commercial businesses such as industrial plants, hotels, hospitals, retailers that use our product to increase their efficiency and reduce their costs, making them more competitive in both a local and global market. Microturbines are installed in hybrid buses, trucks, and we've recently been installing microturbines into marine applications, both here in the U.S. and in Europe. Capstone employs approximately 200 highly skilled American workers in its manufacturing facility in Los Angeles, and with over 120 patents, Capstone is a technology innovator. We produce about 80% of the world's microturbines. Most of the balance is also manufactured in the U.S. by Ingersoll Rand. This is not a product that we're buying from China. This is a product we're selling to China. We have a good and strong business in China. Because we export because of a variety of reasons. That is where the markets are. We sell in over 50 countries, both developing and developed countries on 6 continents. In many cases, overseas markets are stronger than our own domestic markets. Europe is a particularly strong market for Capstone, in part because of feed-in tariffs that exist there. Capstone Turbine sees value in adopting long-term energy policy here in the U.S. We believe that a strong domestic policy will only strengthen our export business. According to Oak Ridge Laboratories, CHP could provide 20% of the U.S. generating capacity by 2030, generating $234 billion in new investment and create 1 million highly skilled jobs. CO2 emissions could be cut by more than 800 million tons per year, the equivalent of taking half of the U.S. passenger vehicle fleets off the road. Energy efficiency, combined heat and power makes sense regardless of where you stand on climate change. Efficiency is good. Saving money on your energy is good. It makes us more competitive. Capstone Turbine has received several grants in research development from the Department of Energy. However, lack of long-term energy policy that promotes energy efficiency and distributed generation in combined heat and power. Sorry.
You can complete your sentence.
Yeah, anyway. So Capstone strongly believes that a strong domestic policy is important. We have a bill currently that was introduced by Linda Sanchez, and would love to see that bill move forward to grow our business domestically, to see our international business grow as well. The two are tied together, domestic and internationally.
Thank you. The chair will recognize herself for the first 5 minutes of questioning, and I will begin by commenting on your testimony, Mr. Krause. And as a resident of California, almost lifelong, we moved from Cleveland before I was 2, but I don't admit that very often. But it surprises me. California, as you mentioned, CARB, and what we live under, the most stringent regulations of any state, I would say, in the country. Yet only 5% of you only sell 5% of your total sales into California. And to me, that leads really to my question, which is for Mr. Eikenson. In your testimony, you mentioned that you're frustrated with the fact that excuse me, I've got so many questions in so little time. But the point that you're frustrated that NEI is absolutely doing nothing to deal with the burdens on government, on business. And can you? I think you were trying to get into that when
ran out of time. Can you go into it a little bit more? Your exact words are, the NEI is silent on the significant obstacles to U.S. competitiveness at home and abroad. Can you expand?
Sure. Well, in fairness, it's called the National Export Initiative, so limiting the concern to exports is I suppose, understandable, but it really should be broadened. I wish it were called the National Economic Initiative, in which, I mean, if we're really concerned about our exporters, we need to recognize first that they are producers. And as producers, they rely on imported raw materials that account for a lot of their costs. And they also are confronted with lots of regulations. Those burdens are immense. Having a free trade agreement with Korea is an excellent idea. It's clearly going to lead to export growth. But cutting a foreign tariff by 5% is a good thing. But what about cutting your costs, your domestic costs, by 10% because the regulatory burden has subsided? There was a survey of about 13,000 business executives that was conducted by the World Economic Forum recently, and it found that there were 52 countries that have less burdensome regulations than the United States. And we operate in a global economy here. There is governments, enterprises are competing for investment, capital investment, and investment in human talent. There's a competition in policy, and I think we're sort of missing the boat here. We have the highest corporate tax rate in the world, regulatory burdens, infrastructure is in disrepair. We don't have a policy that welcomes high-skilled immigrants.
Let me just jump in here if I can. I know in your written testimony you write that the U.S. has the highest corporate tax rate among all OECD countries. How would you recommend reforming corporate taxes?
Well, I'm not really an expert in the tax field, but there's been a lot of tax competition globally over the past decade or so. We need to streamline the tax system. A lot of companies that operate, U.S. companies that are operating abroad, some of them don't want to repatriate their profits because of the corporate tax code, and these companies, in my view, are unfairly demonized as either Benedict Arnold companies or companies that aren't helping the U.S. economy. Well, you can incentivize the return of those investments to create productive facilities in the United States and to hire by changing the tax code. I'm not an expert on how to do that, but there are plenty of others at Cato and maybe even at this table who could help you.
I just like to make that you pointed it out, so that's good enough to me. But also in your testimony, you say something that I think we as members of Congress feel very often at home, and you talk about the American people, that the sentiment that they just don't get it. And you spoke a little bit about it in your verbal testimony, that they think imports bad, exports good. And then you talked a lot about iPhone, and I just whipped out off the the back cover of mine to look. Apple's pretty smart that they do say designed by Apple in the wonderful California. I added a couple words there, but assembled in China.
Yes.
And if perhaps they, in their own way, could help by saying assembled. It's a mutt of a product.
Right.
It's assembled everywhere, and I think that could help. Can you explain? Do you think the American people would begin to understand? And I think about, I have a brother who's an engineer. He's worked for Hyundai and Kia and all sorts of car companies, and he has an American job as an engineer. Can you speak why the American people don't quite understand that?
Yeah, and I think that the media presents fairly simplistic accountings of what the trade deficit means. We hear about the trade deficit on a monthly basis, and it's always reported that imports are bad and we're going to lose jobs. There was a report last week that imports always mean that foreigners are when imports outpace exports, foreigners add more jobs than are added in the United States. I think that's not true. I mean, imports. Lots of companies, lots of jobs rely on imports, and to get to the technical aspect, you flipped over your iPhone. Pascal Lamy, who's the chairman of the WTO, understands that people are misled by these trade statistics. These trade statistics are reflective of a bygone era. We now live in this age of globalization, and we need to break out the constituent elements of the value. And he's sort of leading a charge to try to do that. So people say, hey, this import, in fact, even though it's all attributed as an import from China, it's actually supporting 10,000 U.S. jobs because of the patents or the high-end manufacturing that happened here.
Well, thank you. And I'm down to the last 15 seconds. I'm going to just jump to Mr. Holliman. Why do developed countries such as the U.S. and France still have piracy rates of 20 to 40% respectively? And how much can Congress do, and how much really ought to be technologically driven?
Well, we certainly think the thing Congress can do is to make sure that we have the right laws on the books, and I think there are some additional things we can do here in the U.S. There is the use of trade pressure, and I think I'd put France very high on that list, the fourth highest piracy losses in the world, and the U.S. government should be pressing that issue. Technological measures will certainly help, but they won't solve the problem, and so we need to keep sort of one step ahead of the pace. In the U.S., I think one of the best signals would be ensuring that as the U.S. government is required to use legal software, that federal contractors are required to do that as well. That would be the next big step. That would be a great thing to take to France and to China and other countries and get them to do that.
Thank you. My time has expired. I would recognize Mr. Butterfield for his 5 minutes.
I thank the chairman. Let me go to you, Mr. Krause, if I can. Again, thank you for your presence today. Mr. Krause, recognizing export promotion as a priority, President Obama's 2012 budget increases resources for the ITA, particularly for the commercial service. Meanwhile, others have sought to impose severe cuts to export promotion, not believing it worth the cost. Mr. Krause, Capstone, I'm told, has participated in several trade missions. Would you say they were worth the cost to you as the exporter?
Yes, definitely. We've participated, as you said, in several trade missions, and it has resulted in new business for us. We recently, in the last couple of weeks, received an order out of Tunisia after attending a trade mission in North Africa a year ago or so. The Department of Commerce, by the way, is one of the most professional government organizations I've ever worked with. It's a pleasure to work with them, and we plan to continue doing so.
Well, please tell me, in what ways did the support of the federal government allow Capstone to export goods to new markets it otherwise might not have been able to do?
We use the Gold Key service that we're able to use in-country resources to screen potential distributors or customers prior to arriving, so that when we get there, we already have meetings set up, and we're much more efficient and able to streamline our sales process and partner process. It's a big help.
In your work with ITA, have you had an occasion to encounter U.S. trade professionals that were stationed abroad?
Yes, we have.
And did you find them to be reasonably helpful to you and your company?
Yes, both U.S. employees that were there working internationally, as well as some of the domestic or locals that they have working in the offices there, have always been very helpful to us.
The Republican spending plan that passed the House, we call it H.R. 1, would prevent those trade professionals from being available when and where companies such as yours could use their help to complete sales and to generate jobs back home. Mr. Krause, is it correct that on these trade missions that you have traveled, that you pay your own way, you pay for your hotel room, and for your food?
Yes, we pay our own way.
All right. My final question. Today, Google is the global leader in Internet search. It's worth hundreds of billions of dollars. It employs thousands and thousands around the world, including here in our country, and it is so well known and used that the company's name is now a verb. The idea that led to Google was originally funded in the mid-1990s by the National Science Foundation. And let's not forget that the Internet itself originated with the federal government, and its development was pushed along by NSF in the 1980s when it sought to give researchers across the country a way to access its supercomputing resources. Today, electric cars and iPhones and other high-tech gadgets that we rely on daily are powered by lithium-ion batteries. And the development of this type of battery is a result of federally funded materials research at the University of Texas in the 1980s. These are just a few examples showing that the federal investments now in R&D can lead to innovative, high-value products from the private sector well into the future. It also shows that the federal government can be, is, and must be an engine for private sector growth. And nowhere else is that more true than with respect to developing new energy technologies. In your testimony, you also note, Mr. Krause, that your company has received several R&D grants from the Department of Energy. In the remaining minute, can you please tell me a little bit more about those grants? For example, can you describe the research Capstone has done or is now doing and how that research relates to the growth of your business?
Certainly. Capstone was founded 20 years ago and in part had DOE funding as well as funding from Ford and Southern California Edison to develop a microturbine for hybrid electric vehicles. Our turbine is more efficient than traditional turbines in part because of the funding and the research that we did in cooperation with the government as well as other private companies. Today we have several programs that we're working on, a flexible fuel microturbine that will run on hydrogen. We're also working on a more efficient turbine that will increase our efficiency in the range of 45%. And those programs combine government dollars with private dollars, our own dollars and our investors' dollars, to develop new technologies and products.
Mr. Krause, thank you very much for answering those questions. I wish you well as you continue to grow your business.
Thank
this
you.
Congress wants to be an ally and not an obstacle. So thank you very much.
Thank the gentleman. Chair recognizes Mr. Pompeo of Kansas for his 5 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Welcome to everyone here this morning. A special welcome, Mr. Pelton, a constituent and the leader of a company with 8,000 employees in my home district. Thanks for all the hard work for you and your team in these challenging economic times. I know that a group of witnesses that came to Washington, D.C. before was excoriated for having traveled in general aviation aircraft. I want to go on the record hoping everyone in this room flew here today on a general aviation aircraft built in Wichita, Kansas. Mr. Pelton, you talked about export controls. Can you give me an example of a special mission aircraft at some place where the government got in the way of helping you make a sale in a foreign country for a product that didn't present any national security risks?
Congressman Pompeo, thank you for inviting me.
Can you, excuse me, please remove your microphone?
Excuse me.
It helps the stenographer.
Thank you. There's numerous examples. I can give you one today that's right in front of us that actually kind of dovetails into the discussion earlier this morning dealing with Panama. The government of Panama is interested in our brand new site CJ4, which we just certified last year. For us to even have the discussion with the Panamanian government, I have to apply for a marketing license to go down there to have the discussion. Now, here's the interesting part about that is I don't know what they're interested in. So when I apply for the license, I have to decide, are they looking for a VIP airplane? Are they looking for an airplane that may have a camera on it? It may have a FLIR on it. It may have some sort of medevac. And I have to guess because I haven't been able to have contact with a customer in Panama to really understand because I have to have this marketing license. So I got to go get the marketing license. Then once I have the discussion, which could take 6 to 9 months to get that license. So if the avenue is still open and my competitors internationally who don't have to go through those restrictions haven't gone down there and swept the deal away from me, I'll have to find out exactly what they need on the airplane, and I'll have to come back and work with potentially 3 different departments to get the licenses necessary for whatever equipment may be installed. It could be commerce, it could be state, and it could be defense, depending on what the item is. Many of the items that are on the restricted list are really outdated and not that of national security or technically one that we should be worried about as a country. But I'll have to continue to go through that process, continue to apply, may even be rejected along the way. And then in the end, after the product is delivered, to be able to support that product down there, if it has been determined that there is a component as simple as a camera that gets identified as ITAR, I have to, in any support of that airplane, go through licensing to be able to keep that airplane working properly and keep the customer satisfaction that they demand. So it's a very, very onerous process for product that essentially is getting delivered with nothing that we should be concerned about from a national security standpoint.
Thanks. Are there a couple quick hits, maybe anybody on the panel, a couple quick things that Congress could do? We talk about these regulatory issues. Are there a couple rifle shots where we could, when we've got unemployment where it is today, where we could really find bipartisan support to get something done and move the ball forward?
Before any of my colleagues here respond, I think there are 2 quick hits that were discussed. The research and development tax credit needs to be made permanent. That provides the high-tech engineering jobs that this country was founded on, so we don't become a service industry. And I also believe that while it's been lightly touched on, the corporate tax rate, this is a fantastic country that's #1 in everything, and I hope we're not going to be #1 in corporate tax rates. And if you can find a way to reduce the corporate tax rates, I can assure you that the manufacturers in this country can offset that revenue with new jobs immediately.
Great, thank you.
If I could just add to the tax comment there, it's unfortunately we do seem to be on track to have the highest corporate tax rate in the world if Japan moves forward and lowers theirs. but often there's a comment made in response to that many companies have exclusions that allow them to pay much less. I would just mention a study done by KPMG. They have an index that they do called the Total Tax Index, which looks at what companies are actually paying. And according to this index, companies and operations of companies in Canada, in the Netherlands, and many other countries are often paying 20 to 40% less in taxes than production in the United States is. And this is something that is, those are huge numbers. That makes a significant difference. When the title of the hearing is about making it in America, companies have to take that is something that is very much on their radar as they think about where they're going to be investing and hiring.
I appreciate that. Mr. Holman, did you have something you want to say?
I'll just say that 60 cents of every dollar spent around the world on software comes back to U.S.-based companies. So every single bilateral discussion by any member of this committee or the administration should raise the issues around IP theft.
Great. Thank you. My time is up. Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. Mr. Gonzalez, 5 minutes for your questions.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairwoman. Mr. Holloman, in your testimony, I'm trying to see if I can find it quickly. Nearly 4 out of 5 PC programs in China, 79%, are not paid for. What's that figure for the United States?
For the,
I just want to know what the extent of the problem.
It's just the reverse. So essentially, 80% of the software in China is not paid for. In the U.S., 80% of the software is paid for.
And if you'll just kind of walk me through why is that? And I mean, I know you're going to assume that members of Congress are going to understand software and everything else, but I assure you it's not necessarily a member of Congress. We use programs, we use things that are downloaded and so on. But technically, if you just walk me through, tell me how something in the United States or in China is basically acquired illegally, and it continues, obviously spiraling uncontrollably in places like China.
Right. Well, I'll give you a great example. And I'll focus on the business sector because that's where the biggest opportunity is to change behavior quickly. What would happen, a hypothetical, let's say China, the 80% piracy rate, could be a business in China is operating and they have 100 computers, but they have only paid for the software for 20 of their computers, and they're internally duplicating for all the rest of their operations. Or they may be 100% illegal because they've used an illegal office program or an illegal operating system. So they've just internally duplicated it, which is simple to do. There are no effective penalties against it. And the big thing that we're trying to do in China, which is really what the bilateral discussion is really twofold. One, to get the Chinese government to ensure that when it uses software, that it is using only legal software. And secondly, to ensure that when Chinese state-owned enterprises use software, that they are using only legal software. There are simple ways of making sure that that is done. But unfortunately, in rapid growth markets like China, we are seeing a dramatic lag in the use of legal software. And what's happening is that because the market is growing so fast, the dollar value of that is skyrocketing year over year. And this goes much more broadly. It's not just the software impact, but that is a lower cost of doing business for any enterprise in a high piracy market. And any constituent of yours who is using software, which is most every business, if they have a competitor in a country with a high piracy rate, the U.S. company has a higher cost of doing business than their competitor in the area of tool of production of software.
Now, in the business environment, and I don't want to say anything that could be interpreted and could be controversial, of trying to contrast the situation in the United States and that in China, and why it's viewed with some lax attitude of maybe not seeing anything wrong with utilizing your software without having to pay, obviously, as we said, for the 100 computers as opposed to the 20. But in the United States, is it an environment? Is it a business sense? Is it certain human behavior? Is it enforcement? What is that combination that results in 30% or less or whatever
20%
it is.
in the US.
20% in the United States as opposed to 80% in China.
Right. By the way, I think 20% is too high, and so we're pressing to get it down further in the U.S. It's really two things. I mean, one, it is, we have constitutional underpinnings for intellectual property in this country, and we have the toughest civil laws on the books, and that provides an effective deterrent, particularly against businesses that would otherwise use illegal software. It's just not worth the risk and the cost. And secondly, I think that's also why the software industry has grown so well out of this country, is we began with a stronger market, both size-wise, but in terms of legal protection. In a country like China, there are few effective civil remedies. There are no criminal penalties whatsoever against use of pirated software within a corporate environment. And finally, there just isn't any deterrence in the marketplace that's effective. And that's why it really has to be a high-level, bilateral economic discussion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hellman. Now I
you.
yield back the balance of my time, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. I recognize Mr. Lance of New Jersey for his 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon to you all. Following up on that, and I guess to Mr. Holliman, is it better to have bilateral discussions on this issue as opposed to the WTO, or is it a combination?
Certainly, Mr. Lance, it's a combination, but I think that in this case, the most effective mechanism is for the bilateral discussion. And when members of Congress speak, as they have on this issue, and when the President of the United States directly talks about software enterprise legalization to President Hu Jintao, I think that we have a lot farther to go to see the results. But to me, it takes that type of direct engagement.
And I'm sure you follow this very closely. The recent meetings here in Washington between the two presidents, do you think that that was at all helpful, or do you think we have to do more?
No, I think from a U.S. perspective, they were very helpful in raising it to the highest level on the bilateral relationship with China that we have ever seen. On the China level, have my companies seen any increased sales as a result of those commitments? No.
No.
I hope they will come, but they have not, and I need to be blunt about it, including to the U.S. government. So the U.S. side is working hard, but we have to ultimately test it by results. Do we see increased sales, not just commitments?
Oh, well, thank you. This is very helpful. Obviously, we respect what the administration is doing, but we need to see results and not just levels of talks, even if they are at the highest levels. To Mr. Eikenson, yesterday the full committee passed out of its jurisdiction an issue regarding net neutrality, and I'm sure you're aware of that. What is your position regarding the FCC's recently announced net neutrality regulations?
That is an area that I'm absolutely uninvolved with. So I can tell you that Cato, the Institute, institutionally, and our experts that deal with communications issues like that, we're opposed to it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And then back to the issue of corporate taxation. Obviously, I am in agreement with many of my colleagues that the rate has to be lowered in the United States to remain competitive. To anybody on the panel who might be knowledgeable in this area, I'm also concerned about the repatriation of profits from abroad. Perhaps to Mr. Murphy, your thoughts on that?
Yes, and it's unfortunate that it has become a commonplace and from a number of political leaders to hear the line that that our tax system actually incentivizes investment overseas, when in fact what they're describing is our system of worldwide taxation, which is unique practically in the industrialized world, and the deferral that is allowed on the on income earned overseas is the fact that deferral exists only partly levels the playing field for those U.S. companies. You know, this is an issue that's been brewing for a long time as a competitive challenge for U.S. industry.
My bottom line is we need to create more American jobs, and if we can bring funds from abroad that will create more American jobs, that's what I favor. And I know there's a lot of talk regarding this, but I want to get to the bottom line so we can create more American jobs, particularly more American manufacturing jobs.
The Chamber strongly supports allowing repatriation of those funds, which was done several years ago successfully. We think it should be done again.
Is there any other member of the panel who would like to comment on that? Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I yield back the balance of my time.
I thank the gentleman and recognize the gentleman from Louisiana, Dr. Cassidy, for 5 minutes. Gentleman and a doctor, but please remember your microphone. Thank you.
Mr. Murphy, it's my sense that when we compete internationally, we typically we cannot compete on commodity pricing for tennis shoes, perhaps with China, but we certainly can compete on micro windmills, which are, again, high value added. Would you agree with that statement and that line of logic?
I would very much so, and you see that in high-tech industries, for instance, in the defense industry. It is the most sophisticated products that the United States excels in producing and exports worldwide. But you see it in other, what you don't necessarily think of as high-tech products. For instance, you think of the textile and apparel sector. The textile industry is very capital intensive, and the United States still has a significant textile industry which employs, I believe, close to 500,000 Americans. What we don't have is the cutting and sewing, which is a low-skill, low-value-added operation, the apparel making. That has largely moved outside the United States. So I think that's another illustration.
So if you will, the way to save, if you will, manufacturing, at least in terms of that manufacturing with good jobs and good benefits, is to promote trade, where our workers and our companies which add value and intellectual expertise in so doing employ more, correct?
That's absolutely correct, and you see that in the statistics. And for instance, major manufacturing states like Ohio, for instance, are incredibly dependent on exports. The proportion of their exports of their manufacturing output that is exported is very high. It's well above half.
Now let me ask you, I represent Louisiana in the 6th District, which is Baton Rouge area. And so recently ExxonMobil did a big build out. Now I asked them, since they have plants in China and they have refineries in the United States, what do they do, where do they go? And they said anything that involves intellectual property we do domestically. Because if it's just strictly commodity, we're sure that our blueprints are going to be, this isn't Exxon, okay? I'm not trying to get Exxon in trouble with China. I'll just say the observation of the person was that the absence of intellectual property rights in China means that oftentimes whatever process they bring there seems to be reproduced at a local plant. That said, it seems like, now they also said that it is the availability of inexpensive feedstock, in this case natural gas, as well as the Mississippi River to transport, as well as a highly trained workforce that combines to make the United States the place to be. What would happen in that scenario, knowing that the feedstock is incredibly important because you can find waterways and trained workforces in Europe, if we raised our energy prices to what, say, I think I just read Denmark has a 38-cent per kilowatt hour rate of energy, and probably Louisiana 6 cents per kilowatt hour. If we increased our energy prices substantially, what would happen to the sort of manufacturing base I just described?
Well, I think even in your question you've outlined how it's really a web of policies and industries that come together that add up to the competitiveness of a nation. So absolutely, when you take one of those strands and weaken it, you undermine the competitiveness of industries worldwide. That's why hearings like this are so useful, to be able to draw the connections between these different kinds of policies.
I'm actually struck that when folks talk about raising the price of carbon, i.e. the rate, the cost of energy, they seem to ignore the impact it will have upon domestic manufacturing, at least energy-intensive enterprises. I was just reading how Spain is having to withdraw their subsidies because the effect of the high-cost energy has made them less competitive, weakened their economy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think it used the word demoralize. Any other comments on that?
Well, just in the Chamber's membership, what you've indicated is the reason why there is such a breadth of concern about proposals to add to energy costs in this country, and it comes not just from energy-producing companies and sectors, but from the major consumers, the industrial consumers.
And just to be sure, because sometimes for whatever reason people don't make the connection, if we hurt those industries, we hurt those workers. Those good jobs and good benefits are now lost and they're shipped overseas.
And it all goes into the calculus that executives have to make about where they are going to site production and invest and hire.
Yes, I yield back. Thank you.
I thank the gentleman and recognize Mr. Stearns from Florida for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and this is a very good hearing. I've been watching it on the television. I hear from the other side, they're talking about, they say if the government's broke, why are we giving tax breaks for corporations? And there's been some question about that we're not competitive as corporations. And so, Mr. Murphy, I think one thing we need to explain to the American people is this idea of territorial-based tax regime. And you might use an example like if a company in the United States goes to Germany and opens up a plant, that company's going to pay taxes in Germany, and then they're going to come back to the United States and pay taxes. You might just elaborate on that so that the people understand that there's sort of extra taxation on our corporations.
I'm happy to. As was mentioned earlier, the United States is one of the very few countries in the world that has this worldwide system of taxation. And so the danger is that a worldwide company that has operations in more than one market is going to be taxed twice on its income. It's a huge disincentive. By contrast, all of our major industrial competitors have territorial tax systems where they only pay taxes on their production in a given country. At present, we have some tax treaties that allow us to avoid double taxation, but this is a partial solution, and I think there's a growing sense in the business community that it's time to have a full re-examination of this system and whether or not it's comprehensively putting U.S. industry at a disadvantage.
Another point is Canada has dropped their corporate tax rate, and I think the folks on the other side are saying, how can we drop the taxes on corporations? Well, again, as you pointed out, they're competing globally, and if the tax rates are less in Canada and other countries, those corporations have an advantage.
The Canadian government has taken a very interesting approach to their competitiveness, whether it's cutting their tax rates, which I believe is just a little bit, the corporate tax rate is just above 15%, 16%. They've also undertaken an initiative to permanently reduce tariffs on industrial inputs that they import. As Mr. Eikenson was pointing out, the competitiveness of a manufacturing operation depends on imports much of the time as well. And with little controversy, the Canadians were able to permanently eliminate a lot of those tariffs on imports.
Mr. Eikenson, let me ask you a question. I am chair of the Oversight and Investigation Committee, and we had Cass Sunstein come up, and we had a lot of questions for him dealing with regulation. And the Obama administration plans to implement a slew of new regulations, including regulations of carbon emissions and implementing regulations obviously related to the health care. Do you have any concern? I asked them if there any economic impact on these regulations. They said they didn't know of any. Do you have any concerns about the impact of these up-and-coming regulations on the ability of the U.S. to compete, affect producers and exporters, and what suggestions would you change? What would you offer?
You know, President Obama visited the chamber a few weeks ago, and he said, you know, I've come to the center on taxes, and I've come to the center on trade. Now invest and hire.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of uncertainty to the business environment. The healthcare legislation, the Dodd-Frank bill. There's a lot of pending regulation that hasn't been promulgated yet, and it's leaving the business community in a state of uncertainty. I think that is a problem. You know, regulations that are absolutely sensible and not redundant make sense, I suppose, under certain circumstances. But maybe we have superfluous regulation. Maybe there's too much And certainly the fact that we don't know what's coming down the pike is a deterrent to investment. And as Mr. Murphy said, one way we can stimulate our manufacturing base, which by the way is the most prolific manufacturing sector in the world. We produce more output by value than any other country in the world, and we're doing quite well. But one way is to do what the Canadians did. Let's scrap our tariffs on industrial inputs. And this might be a little bit controversial. Let's revisit the anti-dumping law so that downstream users, our manufacturers, our exporters, can have a say in the hearings at the International Trade Commission.
Thank you. My last question is for Mr. Holliman. You testified that the U.S. government needs to increase its efforts to prevent our own government from purchasing counterfeit software. How often does the government purchase counterfeit software, and how does this happen that the government is not buying legitimate copies of software? I think that's...
No, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, the U.S. government is overwhelmingly acquiring legitimate software, and that has been a formal policy and executive order that's been in place for over a decade. And typically when piracy happens within a government or a business, it may not be a purchase of a counterfeit product. It is simply allowing an extra 3 to 5 to 1,000 people use a software program without having a proper license. And so our recommendation is to build on what is a strong executive order here in the United States about federal use of software. And by the way, inspectors general within agencies audit to make sure they have the proper licenses, to require that federal contractors also have to comply with U.S. laws and ensure that they're using legal software. That will help reduce some of the 20% piracy rate here in the U.S., not eliminate it, but it will be a tool that we can use with other governments to encourage them to lead by example.
And on that note, the gentleman is out of time, and we have to wrap things up today. I want to thank all of our panelists and my colleagues and the ranking member for his help today, for staffs on both sides, and for everybody for your time and for your commitment on these critically important issues. Clearly, we have a great challenge before us, but I've always believed that new challenges create new opportunities. Working together, I'm convinced that we can increase U.S. exports and create new U.S. jobs in the process. I also need to remind members that they have 10 business days to submit questions for the record, and I ask the witnesses to please respond promptly to any questions that you might receive. Again, thank you all very much, and the hearing is now adjourned.